Welcome, everyone. I'm Spiro, and I'm very happy to welcome back Professor Francis Boyle to the show. Professor Boyle is a professor of international law at the University of Illinois College of Law and is the man who drafted the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons and Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, which was unanimously approved and signed into law. Now, for those of you who may have missed our previous interview, I encourage everyone to watch it. Now, Professor, thank you for joining me today.
Cyril, thank you very much for having me on. My best to your viewing audience.
Now, since the last time you and I spoke, there have been some major developments and bombshell studies that have just recently been published. Can you please tell our viewers what is the latest and the significance behind this?
Certainly. On Wednesday, I did give a 1-hour interview on this to InfoWars, and there is now a transcript out there you can find by Googling my name. Let me briefly go through that interview. I review 4 different scientific studies in the literature, professional literature. First, a DNA genetic sequencing of the Wuhan coronavirus by scientists in France and Canada. And their conclusion is that it has gain-of-function properties. As we've discussed before, gain-of-function properties is only useful for offensive biological warfare work, and it has to be done in either a BSL-4 or a BSL-3 facility. And we know that Wuhan is a BSL-4 facility. And it said quite clearly when it was opening up, it was there to deal with coronaviruses and SARS. SARS is a weaponized version of the coronavirus. Wuhan has worked on that before. There have been already reported 2 or 3 leaks from there. So I suspect that's what happened here. Second, then, and you can find all these scientific articles on the interview, is a scientific article reported by the scientist at the University of North Carolina. It is clear that if you just read through it, that they were engaged in gain-of-function DNA genetic engineering on the SARS coronavirus. Likewise, if you read the study, one of the researchers there was one of the top biological warfare experts from China. And he, or that expert, I can't tell if it's a he or a she, but the name is there, was from the Wuhan BSL-4 facility. That's right on the scientific article itself. So it is clear that part of the technology here involved in this coronavirus came from that University of North Carolina lab. The last time I looked, it was BSL-3. Now, I had already condemned that lab before for doing gain-of-function work on MERS, Middle East Respiratory System, which is also a weaponized version of coronavirus. MERS is 33% lethal. The SARS is about 10%. And what we're seeing now with the Wuhan coronavirus is 15 to 18%. 15% by Lancet, 17% if you disaggregate statistics by the Chinese government, which are misleading on purpose, 18% by a British health authority. But it is clear then that there's a direct connection then between this Nazi biological warfare work at the University of North Carolina and Wuhan. It's just there and read it. So obviously this researcher took it back to Wuhan. The third article I discussed, again, scientific article, someone from that Wuhan facility also worked with scientists in Australia. to DNA genetically engineer SARS together with HIV, which we've discussed before. And you have that Indian study with the pictures and everything saying that the current coronavirus involves HIV and SARS. Now, it appears political pressure was brought to bear on those Indian scientists. Prime Minister Modi there is trying to have good relations with China and President Xi. But I read that study. I saw the pictures. It's undeniable. So I think what happened here then. Oh, and by the way, that too, if you read the study, clearly a scientist from Wuhan was involved with the Australian scientists, and the Chinese government paid for it. So this is not a case of China stealing this technology. They bought and paid for it. They bought their way into it. So I think, Spiros, what happened then is that the people there at Wuhan took the technology from North Carolina and the technology from this Australian study and tried to DNA genetically engineer it together to create a chimera of three elements at least. The SARS coronavirus, the gain of function technology from the University of North Carolina, and then the SARS HIV technology from Australia to create a sort of a turbocharged biological warfare agent. We saw this with the swine flu. Swine flu clearly had three elements that were DNA genetically engineered together in a biological warfare lab. So I believe that is what has happened here. And indeed now, the final study I discussed, two scientists from China itself, and you can see the study there, concluded that this probably leaked out of that Wuhan coronavirus. So you can read those four studies, for yourself and draw your own conclusions. They're all there annexed to my the transcript. But certainly that was my conclusion. You'll also note that the North Carolina contract was funded by the National Institutes for Health and NIAID, the National Institute for Allergy and Infected Diseases. So they're up to their eyeballs in this. They knew exactly what they were funding, and they were funding it with Wuhan. And that is why then we are getting total disinformation, lies, and propaganda by Fauci, by the National Institutes of Health, by NIAID, this woman Les Monnier, if that's how you pronounce her name, and the CDC. I've also discussed with you why the WHO is lying about it and covering it up. So that, I think, is the importance of the interview I'm giving to you here today to try to, cut through all this. If we're seeing all this mass confusion and pandemonium, it is because the highest level officials, certainly the United States government, the British government, the Japanese government, and others, will refuse to admit that this is an offensive biological warfare agent, because they're all doing the exact same thing. The United States, Britain, Germany, France, the Netherlands, I suspect Japan, Israel. So how can this properly be dealt with if the highest level officials of these governments are lying and covering up what is really going on here, let alone China, that's been lying, from the get-go. So that is my conclusion, Spiro, that it leaked out of this lab. They were working on this turbocharged biological warfare agent for offensive uses. Some lab worker got infected. This routinely happens at BSL-3, BSL-4 labs, did not realize the infection, went out, did his or her normal daily activities there in Wuhan for maybe 24 days, 14 days. It turns out right now the reported that's not adequate quarantine. 24 days is now the estimate. That comes from Yale. And at the end of 24 days, came down with a fever, reported to a hospital there. No one really figured out what was going on here for a while. And by then it was just too late.
So, Professor Boyle, that is amazing information, and thank you for laying that out so clearly. Now, the 4 studies that you reference of the Wuhan coronavirus states clearly that this COVID-19 virus is without a doubt weaponized and altered 100% for sure. Is that what your analysis is of this, Professor?
Yes, just read the North Carolina study and the scientists there from the Wuhan facility. And also just read the Australian study and the scientists there from the Wuhan facility. This is, direct connection right there. And then these French scientists and the Canadian said, yes, it clearly has gain of function properties. And as I said before, that's the telltale sign of a biological warfare agent, which is exactly what we know University of North Carolina was working on. They even admit it. They admit how dangerous it was. They admit they got approval from NIH to do it. And then they got more approval from NIH to continue to do it.
So now, Professor Boyle, now that we have this evidence and proof, the smoking gun, as you put it, multiple smoking guns, that the Wuhan coronavirus is in fact a bioweapon, does this mean that there would already be a vaccine potentially, since the virus has been modified or engineered? Wouldn't they have reverse engineered the virus? And if so, why are we not seeing or hearing about this potentially available antidote or vaccine?
Well, Spiros, I don't really know if there is an effective vaccine. What happens here, all these BSL-3, BSL-4 facilities, what they do is, and we have 12 BSL-4 facilities here in the United States and maybe close to 200 BSL-3s, they go out and scour the world for the most dangerous pathogens they can find in order to weaponize them. Then they bring them back to these facilities and weaponize them with DNA genetic engineering, gain of function, synthetic biology, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Pentagon, etc. After they've then weaponized these, then they say, oh, well, we're really trying to make vaccines for the agents we've weaponized. But fine. So then they make the vaccines that may or may not work. That West African Ebola pandemic, I've already pointed out, that was produced by a so-called vaccine coming out of that Kenema BSL-4 lab run by the United States that injected those Black Africans with live Ebola, and it set it all off. But even if they have an effective vaccine, which I sincerely doubt, those are the two components of a biological weapon itself. So it doesn't get them off the hook, because the two elements of a biological weapon are, one, the offensive agent to begin with, and then two, a vaccine so you can protect your own people. So they might have worked on a vaccine there. I don't know. They reverse engineer the biowarfare agent they have and then claim it's successful. But that didn't help over there in the West African Ebola pandemic at all. It was giving them live Ebola, and it set off that pandemic. So don't be deceived by this propaganda on this gain of function work or any of this other BSL-3, BSL-4s, all of which should be shut down immediately, that they're out there trying to develop vaccines. They're out there to develop weapons. They first DNA genetically engineer the offensive biological agent itself, and then they try to reverse engineer it to produce a vaccine. So that's really what's going on.
Professor, what are the enforcement procedures in the Biowarfare Act that you authored? Whose responsibility is it to enforce it? And aside from shutting down these facilities immediately, which I would have to agree we should do, what should be the process here for these are flagrant violations? If I'm correct me if I'm wrong.
Felonies and uh, subject to life in prison. I put that in there. I was put under a lot of pressure by the Department of Justice to have the death penalty and also automatic wiretapping. I'm a civil libertarian. I felt that there should be a warrant from a judge and not automatic. But I had to throw the dog a bone there. So I said, okay, I'll give you the automatic wiretapping since we're all wiretapped anyway, all up and down the kazoo. But you keep no death penalty, just life in prison. So that's what it is. I think all these people should be prosecuted there at North Carolina for this. Right now, Spiro, however, I think we're in a containment mode and a protection mode. Right now, that's what's most important. And unfortunately, this can't be done here in the United States because the highest level officials of the United States government are up to their eyeballs in this. Fauci, NIAID, NIH, CDC. So they're not going to come clean, and WHO. So I think the American people are just going to have to get organized here and protect themselves because obviously the United States government is not doing it for them. Look at the State Department flying all those people back from Yokohama, and knowing full well they're contaminating. And I don't believe right now the 14-day quarantine is adequate. I think this Yale study said it should be 24. The North Koreans are saying 30, and they should know because they have their own biological warfare program there. I think that's what we need, but that is not what happened. So there's mass confusion, pandemonium out there, and the people who are supposed to be giving advice here to President Trump are up to their eyeballs in this stuff for quite some time. The FBI can't be trusted because they lied about, covered up, and destroyed evidence on Amerithrax in October of 2001. At the end of 2001, I called up the FBI, high-level counterterrorism official there, Spike Bowman, who I had met at a conference on international terrorism at the University of Michigan Law School. And after reading the technology there in the New York Times, which was a trillion spores per gram, and it floated in the air, traveled in the air, I said this could have only come out of a United States government biological warfare weapons program, BSL-4, and probably Fort Detrick. I then called him back a second time because I had a list of all these programs and these labs. They were at that point they were a matter of public record. I went down the list with him, and then I said, and we know the CIA is involved in this too. And his response is, well, we're coordinating with Fort Detrick. And I said, well, Fort Detrick could very well be the problem here. Someone's on the reservation, is now off the reservation. Later on, it turned out it was Fort Detrick involved here. And at that point, then, the FBI went out to the Ames, U.S. government Ames anthrax collection in Ames, Iowa, and authorized its destruction. So at that point, I knew full well the FBI was in on a cover-up here and destruction of evidence. And then they proceeded to cover up ever since. First, they blamed one guy. He fought back, so they dropped him. Then they blamed it on Ivins and drove him to suicide. No one believes Ivins did it. The danger here is that anthrax lasts forever, so there is still a stockpile of super weapons grade anthrax out there somewhere. It could be at Fort Detrick. It could be at Dugway. It could be at Aberdeen Proving Ground. I don't know. But the problem is you can't trust the FBI. It's that simple. And so you're probably going to need local law enforcement to get involved in this. Maybe the state National Guard could be called up to deal with this. Or in terms of federal agencies, maybe the BATF or the Secret Service. But the FBI has a long history of lying, covering up, and doing damage control. So people are going to have to get organized on by themselves to protect themselves. They can't rely on the FBI, that's for sure.
And Professor Francis Boyle, you have been in documentaries, you've written several books, authored the Biowarfare Act. You definitely know what you're talking about. And you did blow the whistle on that anthrax attack on Congress back in 2001. And since then, you've been blackballed by the mainstream media.
That is correct, Spiros. What happened was after I called Bowman twice that same day, I was then scheduled to conduct a workshop on biological weapons with the Council for Responsible Genetics that I've been affiliated with since the early 1980s at Harvard Divinity School. So as I was walking into Harvard Divinity School, there was a Fox TV crew there from Boston. I said this had to have come out of a US Biological Warfare lab and program. I then went in and conducted the workshop. I said the exact same thing there. Then I came home. This was the first weekend in November. Okay, so right after the terrorist, that first weekend. Then I came home. I gave an interview to a radio station in Washington, D.C. Then I gave an interview to the BBC. So it went out all over the world. And then the hammer fell. No one ever interviewed me again in any mainstream news media source here in the United States, Europe, BBC, Latin America, you name it, on biological warfare programs and weapons, including Ebola, Zika, and other events since then. That's correct. So this isn't an accident or something. Someone gave an order that I was to be blackballed and blacklisted. That's the way it works, Spiros. So fine. That's why I'm talking to you.
And I do appreciate you taking the time to do so. And essentially, just to recap, in a nutshell, these 4 studies that just came out recently of the Wuhan coronavirus have been weaponized. These studies show that definitively by the Chinese with the help of the United States and funded by the National Institutes of Health. This is unbelievable. And Professor Boyle, any closing thoughts or?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me because we've been doing this for quite some time. That's why I drafted the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act. It was to deal with these Nazi death scientists here in the United States doing this Nazi biological warfare weapons work that I condemned for the Council for Responsible Genetics in 1985. You can find that on their webpage, where they asked me to run a briefing for Congress in Washington, D.C. on this, which I did do, and said it is time to have domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention. CREG asked me to do it. So, yes. Now, one of the points I did want to address is, and you did bring this to my attention, were these military games that were taking place in Wuhan. I did look at that, and my conclusion so far, Spiro, and I did want to deal with it because it's going around the internet, is so far this is correlation but not causation. I started the University of Chicago as an undergrad, as a math major, where they had the number 4 math program in the country after Caltech, MIT, Harvard, and the University of Chicago. And I took Stat 210, statistics and probability for math majors, got an A. And one of the first things we learned is correlation is not causation. And likewise, I studied evidence at Harvard Law School I regret to say I only got an A minus there. But again, at best, this might be circumstantial evidence. What I have provided to you with these studies is direct evidence. I don't even know if that, could get admitted into court, but I have provided to you direct evidence and causation.
You're absolutely right.
And so for now, I do not go along with, the notion that this was some type of covert operation over there to sabotage China. I believe they were working on a turbocharged biological warfare weapon, probably in reaction to the fact that they knew we were doing the exact same thing, which you can tell there at the University of North Carolina. They had their own scientists there knowing what we were doing. And also, Spiro, I want to make it clear, I've never worked for the United States government as a matter of principle because of my opposition to the Vietnam War. I've never had a security clearance. I have no access to secret information or anything like that. I just read reputable scientific literature that's out there in the public record and then draw my own conclusions. I'm sure the Chinese do the exact same thing I do, which is probably why they bought their way into that University of North Carolina program going on. And if you read it there, it's clear Wuhan made a financial contribution. They acknowledged they got money from Wuhan. You might ask, why do U.S. scientists do that? It's greed. There's no question all about it. And it's total lack of any ethical training by so-called life scientists here in America. The last time I crunched the numbers, 2015, we had 13,000 alleged life scientists doing Nazi biological warfare weapons work here in the United States, at least 13,000. So there's no ethical training there at all. All they care about is the money. And that's it. So they can be bought, and they were bought.
And you are, in fact, a professor of law, of course, and as you stated, you have shown direct links, direct evidence showing that the coronavirus has been weaponized, and it looks like even the Chinese university did say that it likely came from the level 4 lab there in Wuhan. And when you say Nazi...
The Chinese scientists agreed with me, because as you know, I put out a worldwide alert, I think it was maybe January 24, saying this came from the Wuhan BSL-4. I have a list here of world media and also world web sources provided me by a public relations agency I've worked with. But again, no mainstream news media ever contacted me. When the big interview I did on this on that geopolitics came out, I also circulated it to these lists. Even I have an Illinois media list. They haven't contacted me. And then the transcript I just sent to you, I sent that out to. No one has contacted me. So it's clear that I'm on a blackball list. Indeed, to show you how serious this is concerning the West African Ebola pandemic, the late Congressman Walter Jones from, I think he's from South Carolina, contacted me on another matter, which we discussed. And Congressman Jones represents a big military base down there that was deploying to West Africa. Might have been the 82nd Airborne, I can't remember. And Jones is a conservative Republican, but he's a very powerful member of the House Armed Services Committee. So I said, now on another matter, Congressman Jones, I believe that this is a biological warfare agent that leaked out of that Kenema lab. It's a BSL-4 lab that was set up by Fort Detrick and USAID, and also by the Harvard MIT Broad Institute. They're all in there. And so your troops there that you represent are walking into an extremely dangerous DNA genetically engineered biological warfare agent. So Jones was quite upset, and he said, okay, I will have my top staffer get a hold of you, and you could work with him and try to sort all this out to get my troops protected. So an email was sent, and I responded on the email to Congressman Jones and his secretary and the top staffer saying, here I am, I'm happy to work with you. I never heard from them again. Never. Obviously, someone threatened Congressman Jones, and he was a very powerful member of the House Armed Services Committee and a Republican. Who would have the power to make a threat like that concerning troops that he felt responsible for? And I never heard from Congressman Jones or his office again. Indeed, when Congressman Jones died, I sent my condolences to his office. There was no response. And I never heard from anyone in that office again. So I think that shows you what's going on here when it comes to blackballing and certainly keeping me out of the news media.
Well, and controlling the narrative, because they are unable to control the narrative when someone with your credentials is speaking truth and informing people. So it's definitely in their best interests to keep a lid on it, for sure. And when you say, Professor Boyle, when you talk about and reference Nazi experiments, you're not just saying that to be dramatic. I believe you're referencing Operation Paperclip, which was a covert operation at the end of World War II, where the U.S. snuck Nazi scientists over here and employed them throughout agencies and governments.
That is exactly correct. We deliberately brought in Nazis here, and they were, as you correctly point out, Operation Paperclip, all over agencies of the United States government that we really don't know anything about how many of them there were and what they were doing. But that is exactly correct. And my involvement in this is just Nazi type of biological work. And of course, not to exonerate the United States, because we looked into it during World War II, but we did not use it during World War II. Merck was involved in this right from the get-go. The National Academy of Science was asked their opinion on it about 1943, and they reported back, yes, it is feasible. And the National Academy of Science is worthless here, too. They're up to their eyeballs in biological warfare work, including DNA genetic engineering. So you can't, I've read reports coming out of there, you can't trust what they are saying. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can trust any life scientist who has taken money for biological warfare work from any agency of the United States government, because they're guilty here. They're up to their eyeballs in this stuff. They're only going to cover their own tracks. And so you've got to find outside independent experts, medical doctors, microbiologists. We have some here on campus, public health authorities who have not taken this money, and get proper advice from them as to how to contain this thing, assuming that can be done at this point. I really don't know, to be honest with you.
And for those that don't know, the U.S. has an extensive history of testing biologicals on unknowing citizens here in the U.S. as well, dating back into the 50s, which is a topic for another day, I presume.
That's correct, too. Right. And if you're interested, the early history of the U.S. biological warfare, offensive biological warfare program is by Seymour Martin Hirsch, the Pulitzer Prize winner. And he takes the story up to when Nixon signs the, pretty much, it came out about 1968. And it's all in there, everything. I keep it here for reference purposes. So Nixon signed the Biological Weapons Convention, but what happened, as far as I can figure out, is that the Pentagon and the CIA took it underground, and they never really gave it up. And finally, it did emerge into the public record, starting with Reagan, when I first tried to grapple with this problem and stop it. But as I said, if the U.S. government has been financing all this Nazi biological warfare work, then of course they're not going to prosecute it.
Absolutely right. Professor Francis Boyle, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you will add us here to your list of media contacts that you send out. And of course, you're always welcome back anytime. We look forward to having you back soon as more developments are sure to take place.
Well, Spiro, keep up the good work, and please try to get this interview circulated all over the U.S. news media, all over the internet, so that the American people can act on it and understand they're being lied to by the highest level officials of the United States government. They're going to have to get organized here and protect themselves the best they can.
Well, that's absolutely right. Thank you for that. That's knowing that you're being lied to is the first step to doing something about it.
I'm here on your show to try to tell the truth as I see it. Yes.
Professor Francis Boyle, thanks again so much. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Spiro. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.